Hi, and welcome to episode 54 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I'm Morgan Jackson, a PhD student at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada.
I'm Stephen Hamblin, postdoc at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia.
And today we're joined by special guest Upulie Divisekera, who's a scientist and science communicator in Melbourne, Australia. Upulie, you want to say hi and tell us a little bit about yourself?
G'day. I'm a molecular biologist based in Melbourne, and I'm working in nanotech at the moment.
Awesome.
In nanotech?
Yep, that's right. It was a biology-based project in a chemical engineering lab, and basically none of the engineers wanted to touch it. So guess who got stuck with this one? Okay, well, maybe not get stuck, but it's a really interesting project and very interdisciplinary. So it calls on all of my molecular biology skills and a whole range of new ones to it.
So what type of nanotech work is this?
We're interested in generating vehicles for drug delivery. So trying to create particles that will specifically deliver drugs to targeted cells. And there's a number of approaches that we're using for that. We're trying to use things like colloidosomes, which are polymeric particles, trying to use proteins, and trying to use liposomes as well, and come up with new ones if we can.
Is this specifically targeted for cancer research, or is this something else?
Yeah. I think just as generally to see if they work as sort of controlled release particles, but also obviously our main interest is, of course, cancer, trying to get things like chemotherapies and other special therapies like antibody therapies, specific therapies to specific cancer cells.
I keep seeing stuff like that in the news. How close to being realistic as a frontline therapy is this?
I think it's reasonably close. There are a number of different particles that have already been sort of quite well tested, at least in cell lines, that seem to deliver quite specifically. So things like there's this really great one called a Yocto that's YOCTO well, and what it is it's actually a silicon particle on which they've managed to put a whole bunch of different layers, which can specifically sort of be switched on, switched off. Can release the drug over a period of time, and it seems to work quite well in cells. But of course, with all of these things, you need to test it in animals to see how they go. There are other really good examples of like liposomes. Liposomes are actually they're technically nanoparticles because they're extremely small, about 100 nanometers in diameter, or yes, diameter is the word I'm looking for. Radius, remember maths? Anyway, so they're pretty much the only FDA-approved nanoparticles around, and recently there were reports of them being used to treat diabetes in rats, and quite successfully. So there is promise.
I got to ask, because this is kind of a general podcast for science, but this is about the time when science fiction stories start, and generally end up with people wandering around as some sort of zombie and/or
Oh,
so do you think that we're going to turn into grey goo?
Yeah, that's well, I joke about it, but there's a public fear sometimes of science like this, because
definitely
there's a lot of understanding for it. So people think that we're going to end up as slaves of our nanotech, or turn us into grey goo. So have you faced issues like that? How do you deal with them?
Well, given that at the moment I'm really struggling just to make the particle, I see this potential future of grey goo as being quite far away. Having said that, look, I don't like to discount possibilities. You might have seen that there was a recent publication, I think it was in The Guardian, where they'd asked a bunch of people, including some scientists, which was very kind of them to ask the scientists, what ideas do you think should be retired?
Yeah, the question.
Yeah, and I think there was this really great point from, I think it was Janet Stem-Weedle, I think that's how you pronounce the name, who's an editor for Scientific American. I don't like the idea of retiring any idea. And that's the same thing here. I don't want to discount any possibility, I just find it highly unlikely. We're not even at that level where we can create things that will be self-reproducing, that will be intelligently self-reproducing on the same level as, say, cells or multicellular organisms. So we're a long way off from that. And this idea of this grey goo stems from, apparently it comes from 2 paragraphs in one science fiction novel, but it's captured the entire imagination of people when it comes to nanotechnology. And the person who even wrote it, I'm afraid I can't remember his name, he says, I really regret it because people, or this is the only thing that they remember from my book. There's nothing else that they remember. Replicating molecular robots will consume everything in their uncontrollable self-replication. So they'd be like, molecular rabbits. And this idea that this would happen, like I said, we haven't created anything that's, there are very few things that we've created that are self-replicating. I think that they've managed to do some RNA molecules, and that's pretty much it, which is a sign that, the creation of DNA and well, a functional reproducing molecule is inevitable. But that's pretty much it. So I think it's unlikely, but it's also possible. But as long as we address these issues of safety and ethics and so on really early on, and I think it's very important that we do that. I hope we can avoid it. But why would you also create something that was so pathetically, if you wanted to make something that was going to take over the planet, well, it's kind of against your own interests.
I was just saying, since I started working on viruses, I've received a lot of questions about zombies and when are they going to take over the planet, and should I be worried about zombies? And,
I like how zombies are everybody's favorite undead. Now it's like other vampires don't even matter anymore. It's all about zombies. I actually had a huge discussion with this on Twitter with someone once. We tried to work out if it was possible. Now, given that there are actually fungi that seem to take over, parasitize various insects, and seem to be able to reproduce within it, and so on and so forth, you'd think that. And I would like to point out to any security agencies watching this, it's completely theoretical. But if you could actually either engineer or extract the active ingredient, and I suspect there's a whole bunch of active ingredients, or indeed the entire fungus, theoretically, if you could create a vector for delivery of this agent, maybe you could generate a zombie army. So we had this discussion. We decided, yes, it would theoretically be possible. You'd have to think of a really good delivery agent. Probably a pub would be great. You wouldn't want it to be fast-acting. You'd want it to sort of, because otherwise people will catch on. If they, within 2 days, if they get it, then, your apocalypse is going to be too fast and too easy to control. So what you want to do is to actually have something that will kind of take over people's brains slowly, maybe give it a few weeks, and you can spread it a lot faster. But again, as I said, it's theoretical.
I have to be the dissenter on that, actually. We had David Hughes on. I don't know if you know him, but he does work on Cordyceps, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
And he consulted for, I don't know if you play video games, but he consulted for the game The Last of Us, which was actually, the entire game was basically fundamentally made out of that premise. Cordyceps-like fungal infection of some kind affecting humans, and so on, and World War Z as well. Yeah, he also consulted for that as well, the movie. And I don't want to turn this into a rant about zombies, but most of the zombie ideas that you see in movies, and I got to say, even David's stuff, I find extremely unlikely, to the point of not going to happen. I mean, well, in order for a zombie to actually work the way they're depicted, the infectious agent would have to have control of the biomachinery in a way that just isn't going to happen with their limited genomic space, and it's just you'd be operating the world's most complicated puppet. And
oh, absolutely, and that was something I didn't say as well. It's sort of like you can talk about various extracts or engineering of cordyceps, but what are you going to do? How are you going to control the people? I mean, you can still select out, I'm sure, for the fungus that does have an effect on the central nervous system. But as you say, how are you going to control them? How are they going to be, functional enough that they move around and want to eat people, but at the same time without intelligent control? So there's almost like there's way too much engineering in this, and who really can be bothered? Like, I mean, have you tried?
There's also the distinction between reanimated bodies and just, because there's that subgenre, like, which movie is it? The one where they're infected by a virus and it just makes them really aggressive, right? Essentially, rabies on steroids. That's not too unlikely. It could happen, but reanimating a dead corpse, I don't think so,
Yeah, pretty unlikely. And that's why as well, like you, because you started to work on viruses and you've seen what's involved in actually studying and doing anything with them. It's the same thing with nanotech. It's like you sort of listen to people's panic about Grey Goo, and you're sort of like, guys, I can't actually conjugate the protein to my drug. It's really hard. This stuff is hard and time.
That's part of the issue that I'm interested in talking to you about. Is you're a science communicator and you do this sort of work on a regular basis, and there's this huge public mismatch between what they think we can do and what we can do. And sometimes they think we can do a lot more than we can. Sometimes they think we can do a lot less than we can. And what how do you think we should deal with this sort of problem? Like the CSI effect, and the type of molecular biology stuff you're talking about.
I think it's really difficult, and I think we discussed it on my stint at Real Scientists last week, but it's also something that it's a discussion I keep having with people. There's this really great Australian-based online Twitter chat called OnSci, the hashtag OnSci, ONSCI, and we talk a lot about this sort of thing about whether how do we communicate better? How do we get the message across? And there's a few issues with that. First of all, there's always going to be a segment of the population that you will never engage. There's a segment of the population that is partially engaged, but is happy for you to go on and do your work and then maybe come back with reports of your silver bullet. And then there's a very small segment of the population that is very much engaged, and they're the people that talk to you all the time and want to find out more. And we always wonder, are we, because our thing is like, can we get one more person, just one more person interested in what we're doing, or interested in enough, engaged enough to at least inform themselves? And that's, I think, all you can really hope for as a science communicator, that you'll very incrementally get it out there. And I really do think it's happening, and I do think that social media is one of the ways of doing that, apart from things like effing love science. There's, Neil deGrasse Tyson, his recent speech notwithstanding, is still a hugely popular figure, and it's I can see it sort of slowly branching out. It's slowly getting out there, and I think having scientists talk about their work and chat about their work and protesting about budgetary cuts is slowly getting people's awareness up. And I think, ironically, not having a science minister in Australia as an official sort of position has also kind of made a lot of people who don't normally, the kind of people who write in op-ed columns and say, oh, look at the boffins, have actually sort of sat up and gone, oh, wait, why don't we have a science minister? This is ridiculous. Which is a novel thing, and having more people talk about it is important. In terms of how do you communicate it, as I guess a lot of people watching this will know that my medium is Twitter pretty much, and I really that's one reason though why we started Real Scientists, which is my friend Bernard's idea, is that it's a live medium. You can engage with people in a real-time basis, and you can get real-time answers, and if you don't know, you can always ask somebody else, and that seems to be really, really effective. And the whole reason why I ended up in science communication was I was actually on Twitter, and one day I was spinning some cells down, and that's all I was doing. I was working on, I pulled apart a tumor, and this is the first time I'd actually done this, and I'd never seen sort of a tumor go from three-dimensional to basically one-dimensional or two-dimensional on a plate, and so I was tweeting it as I went along, and people said, "Oh, that's really interesting. Can you tell us more? What's happened to the cells?" And so I get questions later on, what happened to the cells, and so on. So it kind of went from there.
So the way you're discussing it you seem to be adopting a kind of an implicit model for science communication online, social media, which is kind of a hierarchical, almost like trend spotting model. With early adopters who, they uptake science very enthusiastically, and then they spread it to others. The middle and late adopters, and then hopefully it trickles down far enough that random Joe in Alabama hears about it at some point and picks a little something up out of it, as opposed to kind of a flat model where the fact that we all have a Twitter account means that everybody can hear us and everybody is listening to us. Or that's the extremes. There's variations in between. And that's a model. Your way of looking at it, actually, if I've characterized it correctly, is something that I agree with. But it's not necessarily the prevailing opinion.
Do you think the prevailing opinion is the deficit model, that your pure enthusiasm will bring people into it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true to an extent, and to be honest, that's what I started out with. Like I said, I tweeted about cells, but I also tweeted and remember the infamous arsenic life paper, and I found myself tweeting about the periodic table, and people actually engaged with me, and that was something because of my enthusiasm. So, I mean, I have multiple accounts. I have Upulie and I have Science Upulie, and the Science Upulie is just pure straight science tweets, and the other one, my Upulie is my personal account, but I tweet everything. And some people choose to stick with that account because they actually like, even though I tweet a lot, they like to stick with it because they want to see what my life is like otherwise. They want to see what my life in the lab is like. They want to see all the other stuff that I do as well. And so the idea of there being a hierarchical model is only something that kind of evolved out of experience of tweeting and trying to engage people. But I think that there has been a trickle-out effect of, my tweeting on my regular account and ending up with followers from many different backgrounds who actually are interested.
Sure. I think we had about 5 minutes left, so we'll just finish this out. You were in the middle of saying something about age-related science uptake of communication, but I don't know if you have anything to finish on.
Oh, yes, it was about... Do you find that senior scientists and others are a little bit dismissive of science communication? And I'd say that was probably very true. And it probably feeds into other discussions that we've had online about how the nature of a science career and the way that we train scientists needs to change. Sorry, I'm slightly distracted by Morgan fixing.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So we need to sort of change how we train scientists, but also people's attitudes towards communicating their work, because it's really important to understand that, most science is taxpayer funded. We therefore have a duty to communicate the science. And that's certainly being built into a lot of grants. And I know that for many grants, including some more private sort of funding, privately funded grants, they do want to see, what's the community benefit is part of the grant writing process. You have to show that there's a community benefit, which is very easy in cancer research, obviously. So it's really important, but it's very difficult to kind of bridge this gap. It's like, younger scientists are more interested in open access, in open discussion, and so on, while senior scientists have already succeeded to a certain extent using the existing model. There's a conservatism that it's difficult to sort of an attitude that's difficult to break, as it were, or to get that information across. So that is a problem, but I think it will be changing. And I certainly hope to see it change in the way that we train scientists as well. I really think we should train all scientists to communicate. Even if it doesn't mean that you're communicating to the public, you still have to be able to communicate to other scientists, which can sometimes be a problem as well.
Yeah, it can be, and we've all seen examples of that, I think. So one of the things that you guys are doing really well, and you in particular are help spearheading, is the Real Scientists Twitter account, and bringing in and giving exposure to a whole bunch of different people every week. Where did that idea come from, and what's the future for that?
So the idea came from our friend Bernard, who's Bernard Keeley, whom we often call our silent partner. And he was watching a mutual friend of ours who was tweeting for the People of New Zealand account. So there are already existing rotational curation accounts. They tend to be nation-based, and the most famous one is, of course, @Sweden. And a different person coordinates that account for a week, so you get a feeling for what people from that country or whatever are like. So he was watching our friend who was a scientist tweet from that account. I said, well, why don't you just create a rotational curation account for scientists? And it was like, right. Immediately, and so basically within sort of a week to 10 days, we had this set up. Within a few hours, we'd had a Twitter account, we had an email address, and so on and so forth. And it's been really effective so far in giving people a voice who perhaps you might not have heard before, but also hearing from quite well-known scientists as well. And we'd certainly like to get a few more. Say, for example, geologists online and so on. So it's going pretty well, and for the moment we're trying to schedule in for the rest of the year. So we've thought about also the great effectiveness of the Real Scientist model is, of course, it's on Twitter, as we said. It's live. You can engage with the scientist immediately. You can get questions answered immediately. If they can't answer it, they can put it to a pool of scientists to answer the question. We thought about whether expanding to other platforms would be feasible or not, but I think it would probably take a lot more time than we have available, a lot more resources than we have available. Sorry about that. So there's that, but there's also really the whole effectiveness is that it is on Twitter, and it could be that this particular medium suits this particular form of communication. Best of all. It doesn't require a lot of effort on the part of the following audience. You can watch the stream or not, as you please. So I think that's kind of the advantage of that particular model. And it's been fantastic to do. We're continuously amazed by how awesome our tweeters are. Like, every time we sort of log on Monday morning, it's like, oh my God, these guys are great. It's not like we didn't expect it, but it's like, wow, they've just really brought a completely new perspective to it. So it's been a real pleasure to run.
Well, I really enjoy it because I mean, it exposes me to a lot of different disciplines and stuff that I don't normally, even as a scientist. I mean, my feed is normally bugs and SciComm, so it's cool to see, the astrologies and the astronomies, not the astrologies. That's totally wrong. I hope there's not there. They're not in the Real Scientists. That's what we'll just say.
No.
But the astronomers and all the various other disciplines that go in, and I know that I've expanded my Twitter feed just on following them afterwards. So it's very cool that way. Do you get much public reaction to it? So I'm sure there are a lot of scientists that sit there and read the Twitter account. But do you get much public feedback from it?
We do. Feedback tends to be Twitter-based as well, even though I keep tweeting email addresses at people. It's like, if you want to tell us, just write to us. But we do, and we actually ended up doing a survey for a paper that we're presenting at the Australian Science Communicators Conference this year, a few weeks actually. It was a survey, and we asked people to respond, and we had about 180 responses. And we asked people whether they identified as scientists or not. But as my colleague James Smith pointed out last week when I said this, when I was tweeting about it, I said, well, everyone who's engaged, can partially count themselves as a scientist, so we don't necessarily want to make a huge separation between, BSc, non-BSc, BSc who doesn't use the degree or whatever. At this stage, the people who didn't self-identify as scientists was about 25%. But that was only 180 responses from 8,000 people, so and it's quite difficult to sort of break it down. So I think it's probably something in the region of, it's probably about 50-50 based on words. If you do an analytics on words in people's bios, followers in followers' bios. But we are getting engagement, as far as I can see. Quite a lot of people, including journalists, have sort of contacted me to say, oh, this is really interesting, it's a really good resource, and so on. And that's what I see it as. It's a good resource as well for people to look back on discussions, to find people to contact, to find people to talk to about very scientific questions, as well as, transmitting science live.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are doing a good job with that, for sure.
Thank you.
So we're just about out of time here. Upulie, where can people follow along with you and Real Scientists online and see and hear all about the new science news and things that you are so exuberant about online?
You can follow me. I've got sort of two accounts. One is my regular account at Upulie, Upulie, and I tweet about everything, including science. There's a pure science version of that. It's called Science Upulie, and that's just, pretty much science links. And please follow Real Scientists. So it's Real Scientists is one word on Twitter. And we also have a blog, realscientistswordpress.com, and you can sort of you can read up on the scientists that we have and what they've been talking about in the past week. And we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. If you're listening to us at home, this has been Breaking Bio. You can find us online at breakingbio.com or on Twitter at breakingbio. Hope you join us next week for a new episode.